My revenge, taking back the life they tried to steal. The day Carol, my mother-in-law, moved in was the day my life slowly started unraveling. She didn't come because she was invited or because she genuinely needed care. No, she came because Paul, my husband of 6 years, insisted it was the right thing to do. "We have plenty of space," Paul had said casually one evening. "Besides, Mom's getting older. She can't manage on her own." I remember feeling the unease creep up my spine. Carol and I had never had a close relationship. From the start, she had always been distant, dismissive of me, even rude on occasion. But I ignored it, telling myself that this was just a phase, that I could handle it for Paul's sake. After all, we had shared many happy moments in our marriage. I believed we were strong enough to withstand this. However, nothing could have prepared me for what happened after Carol moved in. The first few weeks were filled with tension, though I kept trying to maintain a semblance of peace. Carol criticized everything I did. If I made a simple dinner, she would make a snide comment about how she used to cook 3-course meals for Paul every day. If I cleaned the living room, she'd remark about how her house was always spotless without needing a deep clean. I tried talking to Paul about it. "She's not being fair," I said one night after Carol had spent an entire dinner berating my cooking. "I don't know why she's acting like this." Paul shrugged, distracted by his phone. "She's just old school. She means well. Don't let it get to you." I should have seen the warning signs right then. Paul had always been close to his mother, but I had never imagined he'd take her side so readily. Still, I tried to brush it off. I told myself I was being paranoid, overreacting, and that things would settle down once we all adjusted. But as the weeks passed, things only got worse. Carol's criticisms escalated from passive-aggressive comments to outright insults. She started rearranging the furniture in our house, moving my personal things without asking. When I confronted her, she would give me a sickly sweet smile and say, "I'm just trying to help, dear. You don't mind, do you?" It became clear that she had no intention of letting me feel at home in my own house. The once cozy place Paul and I had built together now felt foreign, like I was a guest living under someone else's roof. Paul, instead of defending me, began to reinforce his mother's actions. "She's just trying to make things better," he would say. "You're being too sensitive." He had started spending more time with Carol, laughing at her stories and ignoring the growing distance between us. Our marriage, once so full of warmth and understanding, began to feel like a cold business arrangement. Paul had changed, and I no longer recognized the man I had married. The Paul who used to hold me after a long day and ask about my thoughts and feelings now barely looked at me. His coldness was cutting, but what hurt most was the fact that he sided with Carol on everything. One particularly bad night, Carol had invited her friends over for dinner, without consulting me. I came home from work to find her and a group of women seated around my dining table, discussing everything from politics to fashion as if they lived there. Carol had taken over the kitchen, cooking a feast and acting as the lady of the house. I pulled Paul aside, furious. "You're letting her take over everything," I whispered, trying to keep my voice down so Carol's guests wouldn't hear. "She didn't even ask if this was okay." Paul's face hardened, something I wasn't used to seeing. "You need to relax," he said coldly. "Mom's not hurting anyone. She's my mother, for God's sake. You act like she's some kind of enemy." I was stunned. "Paul, this is our home. We're supposed to make decisions together." "Well, maybe you need to be more accommodating," he shot back. "Mom is staying here because she needs to, not because she wants to." That night, I lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling. Was I really the problem? Had I somehow become the unreasonable one in this relationship? Weeks passed, and I tried to salvage whatever was left of our marriage. But with every passing day, I felt more like a stranger in my own home. Carol took over more household responsibilities, organizing, decorating, and even micromanaging Paul's schedule. She treated me as though I didn't belong, as though I had stolen her son from her, and Paul did nothing to stop it. In fact, he encouraged her. I was becoming invisible. One evening, after yet another dinner where Carol criticized me for something trivial, I snapped. "I've had enough of this," I shouted. "You can't keep treating me like this in my own home." Carol didn't flinch. Instead, she looked at me calmly and said, "Maybe this isn't the right home for you." Paul, standing beside her, didn't say a word. "Paul?" I pleaded, my voice breaking. "Are you really going to let her talk to me like this?" His eyes flickered to Carol before landing back on me. "You're making things difficult, Claire," he said quietly. "Maybe it would be better if you took some time away." I felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under me. "You want me to leave?" I asked in disbelief. "Just for a while," Paul said, avoiding eye contact. "Let things cool down." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After all I had sacrificed for this marriage, after all the effort I had put into building our life together, my own husband was asking me to leave, because his mother was making my life unbearable. I stood there, stunned, feeling the walls close in around me. Carol watched with a smug smile, satisfied with the outcome. I realized in that moment that I had lost. The life I had fought so hard to protect had crumbled, and the people I thought I could rely on had betrayed me. The next morning, I packed my bags. As I was leaving, Carol sat in the living room, sipping tea, not bothering to look up. Paul was nowhere to be seen, and the house, once my home, now felt like a prison I was finally escaping from. I found myself at a friend's apartment, numb and disoriented. I couldn't believe how quickly everything had fallen apart. How could my own husband turn on me like that? How could he choose his mother over me so easily? For weeks, I wallowed in self-pity, blaming myself for what had happened. Maybe if I had been more patient, more understanding, things wouldn't have turned out this way. But then, as the days passed and the fog in my mind began to clear, I realized something that changed everything. The house was in my name. It had been my decision to handle the paperwork when we bought it, mainly because Paul had been too busy with work. I had signed the documents, paid the mortgage, and maintained the house. Legally, the house was mine. That's when it hit me. I didn't have to accept this. They had pushed me out, treated me like I was disposable. But the truth was that I held all the power. The house belonged to me, not them. The more I thought about it, the more furious I became. Paul and Carol had taken everything from me, my home, my dignity, my peace of mind. But I had one last card to play, and I was going to play it. I met with a lawyer the next week, and we quickly set the wheels in motion. Legally, I had every right to evict them from the house. The paperwork was straightforward. Paul and Carol had no claim to the property, no right to stay there after what they had done to me. The process was quicker than I expected. It took a few weeks, but eventually, the eviction notice was ready. I waited until the morning it was to be served, and then, with my lawyer by my side, I went to the house one last time. When Carol opened the door, she looked at me with a mixture of confusion and disdain. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm here to take back my house," I said calmly, holding up the eviction notice. "You have 30 days to leave." Her face twisted in shock. "You can't do this!" Paul appeared behind her, his face pale as he saw the papers in my hand. "Claire, what is this?" "It's an eviction notice," I said, my voice steady. "This house is in my name. You both need to leave." Paul's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're evicting us?" "You left me no choice," I said, looking between him and Carol. "You threw me out of my own home. Now it's your turn." For the first time in months, I saw panic in Paul's eyes. He tried to argue, to plead with me, but I had already made up my mind. Carol, furious and sputtering, tried to assert her control, but there was nothing she could do. The law was on my side, and they both knew it. As the reality of the situation sank in, they began packing their things. I watched, standing tall and resolute, as they gathered their belongings. The power shift was palpable. Carol, once so smug and domineering, now looked defeated. Paul, who had been so cold and dismissive, was now desperate, trying to convince me to let them stay. But it was too late. They had taken everything from me, and now I was taking it back. When they finally left, I stood in the doorway of my house, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. I had reclaimed my life, my space, my dignity. I had been betrayed, abandoned, and humiliated, but I had come out the other side stronger than ever. Paul had chosen his mother over me, and in doing so, he had lost everything. But I had gained something far more valuable. I had rediscovered my own strength. The house, once a symbol of my pain and betrayal, was now a testament to my resilience. And as I stood there, watching the sunset through the windows, I knew I would never let anyone take my power away from me again,